Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call the Winnebago County Mental Health Board meeting for the month of April to begin. And roll call of the board. Majority of the body. And Darrell Bradshaw. Here. Dr. Copeland. Dr. Gorski. Richard Clark. Here. Margie Lindmark. Tim Neighbors. Here. Jeff Nielsen. Here. Dr. Penny. Here. And Mohammed Yunus. Yeah. And then we have Jason Holcomb, our director, and the staff that we have Chelsea, Lance, Alex McCann, and Amy Solomon. And this lady to my left is Randy Quantz, who is our corporate attorney.
We also have Jennifer Gibson from my office as well.
Okay. Welcome, Jennifer. Good to have you. Okay. And then we have no one signed up today for public comment, but we do have a presentation for today. So we have an accelerator award from the Winnebago County, and this is the Juvenile Detention Counseling Center that's being planned. So,
good afternoon, I'm Julie Bradshaw, the superintendent of the Winnebago County Juvenile Detention Center.
And Debbie, are you on? You unmute and speak.
I am here. Thank you.
So I'm going to provide you with a brief overview of our space needs study that just wrapped up a few weeks ago. As we know, the original building was built in 1982, originally a 32-bed facility. We put an addition on the facility to increase it to a 48-bed facility in 1995. Currently, right now, behavioral health services include 3 full-time therapists with freedom and 1 part-time post-grants therapist who's there 20 hours a week. Our behavioral health stats are similar to the ones that we presented to the board a few weeks ago. 228 unique individuals served and 972 individual sessions completed, along with 430 youth attending group sessions such as seeking safety and DBT. Current space limitations, obviously, our freedom therapists are using a pod for office space, which is not great. Those services, including our psychiatric services, are in our gym, and the quiet room we use for a virtual court. And we have limited evening program due to our lack of space. Venture Architect was the group that did our space needs study, and obviously our phase 1 priorities continue to be focusing on the detention center and getting therapeutic spaces, visiting, meeting, and court spaces, and another classroom due to space restrictions currently. And we'd like to increase or modernize our medical facilities. And obviously we have a lot of issues with storage and parking. Phase 2 priorities focus on the assessment center, relocating them to the north end to the juvenile detention center. Currently, right now, they are in the JJC, which is the old federal courthouse. And we would like to reopen the day reporting center, which was a program that we had out at the North Campus, right behind the juvenile detention center, that closed several years ago, actually, due to funding cuts. So this is one of the renderings. I know it's terribly small. This is why I brought this, so this is a better visual for everyone to see. The red colored diagrams basically is what they want to improve at the detention center. The red that's currently in the white, which would be basically remodeling. And then the next phase would be like the assessment center, which would be in orange, and then the yellow, which would be our day reporting center. Phase one, that was a rendering of what the building would look like. Currently, for everyone who drives by or has seen the juvenile detention center, the entrance would go to the back of the building. And then the front, that would be the main entrance back there, and the front of the building would still be used for visitation purposes. But the main entrance would have a main security area where all the visitors would go through security, and then they would have to go to either the detention center, or if they needed to go to the day reporting center, or to the assessment center. This is a cost for phase one, which obviously the 5% escalation that they included on there, which was put on for Venture, it's $9 million. Phase two moves on to the juvenile detention center, juvenile assessment center, adding that out on the North Campus and all that cost-wise. Phase three would include the day reporting center, which would be also on the campus. And they would be shown in yellow, the day reporting center. There's two green areas that you see there that would be outdoor rec areas. We would have one for the detention center and one for the day reporting center, just because the kids coming in custody, we don't want to mix with out of custody kids, obviously. And that would be the total cost for the whole project. Our therapeutic spaces, this is a rendering from the architects, which would be on the front side of the building, which would be roughly right in here. And that would be the cost that they have given us for those spaces. It's $2,490,000. That was a brief overview. Were there any questions? I'll leave this up if anybody wants to look at it.
Your last number, was that the number for the space you're looking for the offices?
Yes.
That was 2.4?
Yes, we asked them to do that specifically for like the mental health suite, we called it, and they came up with that number.
Will they ask if that number would change? Is this included in the whole project, any one of the phases, the space right here?
This would be, if this was just done by itself,
Right.
that is what it would cost.
Did they give you? Is this space included in one of the phases?
Yes,
Which one?
it was in phase one, the red.
Okay, so that's part of the $9 million then, initially? Okay. Were they able to tell you the cost as part of the $9 million, not being a separate entity? You follow my question?
Were they able to like separate it out? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. As part of phase one, how much of the $9 million would this space entail? I'm guessing it'd be less than 2.4, but I don't know yet.
I don't believe they gave us any numbers on that. We just asked them to break it down. If we just did the mental health suite, and if we did just the detention side, or if we did day reporting and the assessment center.
Okay. And you have the land mass to do everything you have here. I think you came to this board looking for about 2 million for the space, am I correct? We only have $1 million to give, am I correct? If we were to approve it, how would you make up that extra $1 million?
Debbie has been working on that, the Director of Court Services. Debbie, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. We have a couple of different avenues that we have been exploring. We have been working with some of our legislators to see if there's any appropriation money that could potentially help fund some of this. And then once we get the final report, this is the preliminary final report from Venture. Once we get that final report from them, we will be bringing this to the full county board to ask for their support to help make up the difference between what the therapeutics, well, to present to them the whole scope of the project and then to see what they are available to be able to help fund. So we're looking at every option that we can to help for the funding.
So is there a chance the county board would approve phase one, which would include this, and you would not need the money from this board?
I'm sorry, I missed part of that. I heard, is there a chance that the county board would approve phase one?
Correct.
Yes, I think there's a possibility of that. I don't want to make any commitments for the board at this point because as I've said, the final report isn't complete. And so until we had that, I did not want to bring that before the full board. I don't expect the numbers to change as far as the costs. Venture was just doing some final touches on the report and looking at some of those details though. So I do feel like the numbers that we have presented to you are the good estimates of the costs as provided by Venture.
And if this board were to approve the request, what's your next step?
Then our next step, whether or not the board approves this, is for us to go to our county board and make them aware of what the results of this are. If the county board were to say to us, I'm sorry, we can't help fund the stage one, then what we would do is go back to Venture and say to them, this is the money that we have been allotted. Show us what you can do for the $1 million. What can you give us for 1 million?
They have not yet been asked that question?
No, we have not, because to be honest, I didn't know what that number was. I believe we had applied for 2 million and I knew that full funding was not yet available, but I didn't know what the number looked like that the board could potentially have available.
Answer, Debbie? Seems to have lost contact there.
Oh, I'm back, I think. Was I frozen?
Yes.
Yes.
I think they
Okay,
did not.
sorry.
Would you go back to your last answer to Mr. Nielsen's question?
Sure. The question was related to what our next steps would be if the board would approve $1 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So my next step, regardless, is to go to our county board and make them aware of how things go today and make them aware of the final report from Venture. If it were that the county board were to say to us, I'm sorry, we cannot give you the money to do either the therapeutic space or all of phase one, then I would turn back to Venture and say, this is the money that we have been awarded through the mental health board. Show us what you can do for this amount. Show us the therapeutic spaces. We were unaware until today what the allotment could be from the mental health board. I believe we applied for 2 million. And so I was unaware of what number was still remaining that could be a possible award for us to give to Venture. They have been fabulous for us to work with, and I'm sure that they would be willing to work with us if we said, this is what we have available, and they would be able to give us another plan.
That number is roughly half of what you asked for, 1.02 million.
Correct.
Would it be to the best interest to have those options already on the table before coming to us? Debbie?
Certainly, if I had known that 1 million was what was on the table, then I would have said to Venture, show me what you can do for 1 million. Again, I didn't realize that that was what our limit was because I believe we applied for 2. So we were going for that cost. We were telling them to try and hit the 2 million mark. So I apologize that we didn't realize it was only $1 million, not only, but only $1 million to be working with.
I guess I want to see more options. Just to see what it's like before. Debbie, you know, obviously, it sounds good. Everything is good on paper. But But I guess, I personally, I think, Jeff, maybe I'm kind of echoing what you were saying earlier in another form. If there were other options, we could see everything, and then we can make a better assessment of how much we think we can award.
Okay, so are you saying you want to see what a $1 million option? Like, I mean, I'm gonna have to go back to Venture and say, show us what you can give us for this amount, for me to be able to give them an idea. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, Debbie, I think yeah, that's exactly it. If you can
Okay.
find out what can be done.
I think that's one of two. One would also be what the county board can do for you, if they could find some money and give you quarter mil, half mil, 1 mil. I mean,
Correct.
That's part of the equation also.
Yep,
What
I would
time-
agree. I would agree. And I do think that that is the critical next step for us, is to go to the board and say, can you help support this? And if so, what does that look like? Because, I mean, we can ask Venture to do $1 million project, but if the board would be able to support us for the full therapeutic cost, then we wouldn't even need to go down that road potentially.
Right.
We wanted to be able to come to you for this meeting today. I mean, ideally, we would have waited another week or two until after we talked to the county board, but we wanted to make this meeting as requested so we could give you the information that we had thus far from the space needs study.
Okay, well, we appreciate that, sure.
Yeah, makes sense.
We appreciate that. Okay.
All right.
Thank you for your.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Jason, about a monthly activity report for March.
I think the highlight of the last month, although there was a lot going on, was probably the case management conference that was hosted at Northern Illinois University's Rockford campus by NICNE through their Rockford Area Case Management Initiative funded through the Mental Health Board. I know Dick, you had an opportunity to be there. Mary Ann hosted a panel discussion between 3 of the funded programs, and they talked about the collaboration. And I think it was just great to hear their perspective of how much some of these programs are now working together and how much the culture has shifted over the last 3 or 4 years since we started funding some of these programs. So it was just a great highlight. Dick, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. Specifically, what Jason's talking about was the panel was on the CRT, the crisis team. And it was terrific to hear the level of cooperation and collaboration that's now going on. And it was really proof for the process that the board has of using site visits and the monthly monitoring as a way of pushing the agencies to kind of like keep up, taking their programs up in terms of giving, to see if they can get more quality service out of the time and effort that they're making. And clearly that, with that team, that's happening. And it was a delight to hear that.
Looking forward, there's a few events coming up. One is Stepping Stones. We'll be having a groundbreaking ceremony for the new build group home that the Mental Health Board is funding. So I believe I sent that information out to you, but if you didn't get it and you wanted to attend, please let me know. Also, Crusader Community Health. I don't know if this went directly to the board members or if it just went to me, but on Thursday, April 10th at 11 a.m., they'll be doing a groundbreaking for their Linden and South Alpine facility that the Mental Health Board is funding in part for the mental health space within that new facility. So you're welcome to attend that as well. And so if you need more information, let me know.
Time?
11 a.m. And then finally, Chelsea, you want to highlight the?
Yes, so our main community event that has the resource tables of all the funded agencies, that will be on May 21st. It will be at Cliff Breakers. So, we will be having a speaker who is the founder of, To Write Love on Her Arm. It's a youth kind of mental health positive, focus. To help, and so I'll be it's fast approaching and, there'll be, information coming out very soon.
That's all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Next, folks, on our agenda is the minutes for March. So, if, like to, all right, it's been moved and on a second to approve the minutes for the month of March. Any comments or issues that we need? Okay. Okay, all in favor of the approval? Anyone opposed? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Then we move to the action of resolutions. And the first one is authorizing the funded program for moving budgets around. Let's see. Thank you. Thank you. So on this resolution for 2025X, resolution authorizing funded program budget updates for program years 4 through 6. And whereas the Winnebago County Mental Health Board published a 3-year strategic plan defining priorities and target populations for program years 4 to 6, and released a notice of funding opportunities for those programs, requesting proposals aligning with the strategic plan priorities for up to $60 million for total funding. And whereas the Winnebago County Mental Health Board has approved 38 proposals totaling $954,466.19 for program years 4 through 6. And whereas 3 of those funded programs requires a budgetary change to reallocate funds to better fulfill their approved scope of work. Therefore, resolved that the Winnebago County Board as follows. The first one that we have is from Marshmallow's Hope Program. Okay, now, do I need to go through? No, okay.
No,
You
so
have seen-
the changes are outlined, and then there's a representative from each organization here today if you have any questions regarding any of the.
I have 2 on Marshmallows, what do you do now?
Yeah, go ahead. Todd is the CFO for Marshmallow. Todd, can you hear us?
I can hear, it's a little muffled, but I think we're okay.
So dropping 1 full-time employee, does that affect the outcome, what they plan on doing with the award?
Not really. There was a IT person that's no longer with us, and so that at least not for the entire year. So that reduced that part of it. We're hiring an IT company we have at a reduced rate, and you'll see some of that reflected further down.
Okay, and the second one's more of a board question. They're replacing a furnace. Is that something we would normally do as part of a request?
There are capital expenditures in some of the core program grant budgets, occupancy, and then the occasional capital expenditure depending on the nature of the project. Actually, the Stepping Stones group home project, which is fully capital project, was a core program project.
Yeah, this one I discussed because of the adjustment,
Yeah.
going from personnel, some of it going to capital.
Yeah, it's just on a project by project basis, depending on what the board approves.
The second budgetary request was around Rosecrans. And so again, you can see here what changes they're asking for within their budget line items. Any questions or comments that people want to make to that? And then the final one is Shelter Care Ministries with the Jubilee, the Outreach Housing Stabilization Program. And again, you know, movement between line items. Okay. If there are no questions, then I would ask for a vote to approve.
We have to have a motion first.
Yeah,
Motion to accept.
right. Jeff? So moved.
Second.
Okay, second, thank you, Edwards. All right, so Mariana Body, Andrell Bragg Shaw,
Yes.
Dr. Copeland,
Yes.
Dr. Giardini,
Yes.
Dr. Gorski, Margie Lynn Mark, Tim Neighbors,
Yes.
Jeff Nielsen,
Yes.
Dr. Penny,
Yes.
Mohammed Yunus, and Richard Quinter, yes. Okay, so that's been approved.
Thank you, Todd.
Okay, so I say goodbye now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you all very much.
Okay. All right. Now we go on to our next resolution. Next tab.
Yeah, that's actually.
Yes, thank you. Pardon? Yes, right. This has to do again with the juvenile detention program, which we just heard from. Whereas the Winnebago County Mental Health Board published a 3-year strategic plan priorities for programs 4 through 6. And whereas we published a notice of funding opportunity for proposals to fund that accelerated, time-sensitive, and launch impactful capital improvements regarding improving mental health and substance abuse services, specifically for Winnebago County. And the proposal to impact human capital, the skills, knowledge, and experience possessed by the individual or population, and viewed in terms of their value or cost to an organization. And then the third aspect was social capital, the networks of relationships among people who live and work in a particular community, enabling that community to function effectively, and physical capital, tangible, human-made goods or assets as building materials and supplies. Whereas the Winnebago County Mental Health Board received one application requesting funding totaling $1,133.37. Up to $10 million was available for the funding accelerator programs, and the issue here is that $8,872,866.63 has already been awarded. Therefore, and whereas the Winnebago County Mental Health Board members reviewed, evaluated, and scored an application according to the established scoring rubrics that were published alongside the notice of funding opportunity, and developed the recommendations for these organizations and programs. And so for that, therefore, the Winnebago County Mental Health Board as follows recommends that the Winnebago County Juvenile Detention Counseling Center receive an amount of $1,027,133.37 in response to their request. The Winnebago County Mental Health Board shall not fund the following proposals after review of the application. And in that case, fortunately, there's nothing that we have awaiting that category, okay? All right, so then we need to, if you don't mind, we're gonna need to vote again, to approve. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Excuse me, organized. We need a motion for, approval of that. Okay, Terry? Okay, okay, Tim, thank you. All right. Mariana Body?
Discussion.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, point of order, discussion based upon the previous discussion, would it be appropriate for us to have a motion to table the vote until we get the information that to the question? In terms of them going to the county board and then coming back.
Okay.
I don't.
That's a good point.
That's what I
That's a good point. But we had already, but I think this has already been approved, correct? No?
It's going through the process and it's been, this group, based again on what the application was, have approved it, yes, but it needs a final vote. There, and we can have the motion and then you can have the discussion on your point.
You have a question here.
Right.
No, I
That's
don't have a
correct.
question, I guess, got a statement on just the whole process. So this mental health facility at the juvenile detention center is part of a big it's part of phase one. The phase one project is $9 million. The mental health building portion of it is $2 million. So what the detention center is looking for is the mental health portion, because they know when they go present this to the county board, with us having a mental health tax, the county board's natural reaction is the same as been ever since the mental health tax been in existence. Since it's mental health organized, what is the mental health board going to provide? So this is not what's, I'm just going off what typically happens with the county board. So with us saying that we're going to wait, they're going to say, well, the mental health board is not going to provide anything, scratch that section off the building, and we only do the rest of phase one. And that's what's going to happen if we don't approve this. And there just won't be no mental health facility in there. They just do the rest of the building about it.
I think I understand what you're saying. But in that case, we're giving $1 million, not knowing what they can do with $1 million, because they don't know where the second mill's gonna come from. They have to go back to the architect for the space study.
Or just like she said, she'll find it, you know, I don't think she'll. Even if they have to come and break it down in the process because they only got $1 million, there'll still be a facility there for them to use with that $1 million. Just because we don't see it in the beginning won't mean it won't happen. But if we scratch it all the way together, it's a possibility that it won't happen at all.
The limit that we have right now is because of which this board, we set the limit at $10 million. So that's what we're up against, is that ceiling. Okay, so again, so the question would come, can this board, for example, could we make this accelerator fund $12 million? Could we expand that in order to subsume this application?
Do we have the ability to do that?
Good,
You can do a new notice of funding, right?
Right, you would have to start the process.
I just want to be clear that I'm willing to vote, but based upon the discussion to my fellow board members, I thought the concern was that since she was gonna go to the county board and see what they were gonna do, you felt that, you know, if you could have all the options on the table. That if I understand Tim correctly, if they do go to the county board, based upon the current sort of climate and past sort of behavior, then they're going to say, well, the county board, the mental health board ain't gonna do it, we're not gonna do anything, which is good information to know. But I just wanted to be sensitive to what you guys are saying. I'm willing to vote on this now, but I didn't want us to sort of short shrift what I was understanding you to be asking.
Following up what we were saying, Reverend, one of the options is also to go back to the space study and say, what can you do for a mill, assuming they can't find the extra money. I would be much more comfortable knowing that. I fully realize what Ken is saying, I can understand what's gonna happen, county board's gonna say no. But even if they did, then they have $1 million, and what can they do with it? Can they do what they need to get done?
That's right.
Because if I recall right, Jason said we have 3 people in the wings waiting. If this money doesn't go through, we could look at approving. But I'd rather know, what can they do with the mill before we give it to them, and they say, well, we really can't get it done for them. The money just, we pull it back, and we just, so. That is right.
Let me clarify something. If we, the question was, can we expand the amount? And if we expand the amount, we do have to open it up for other people as well, correct?
Yes.
So we're not just expanding it for them. Correct. It has to be available for everyone else.
And that's a whole nother set of process.
Yes. Let me go back to something Brennan said earlier. Before we did last month, table it for a month, and we have to come back and see what they've done.
Well, can it be done? Can you come back in a month? Okay, if we can get down those figures and facts by that time, I mean, we got a month's time, then we can feel more faithful in what we're gonna do. Okay,
And in that month's time, they're going back to check with the builders, not necessarily going back to check with the county board. Is that correct? Is that what we're asking them to do?
I think both things are gonna happen.
Yeah.
I believe so.
Right.
Oh, I was gonna say, within that month, you don't necessarily have to wait until, to give us a, like, just some kind of letter of what you found, or some kind of proof. You can send it so we can read it over before you actually. Yeah, right, before you approve it.
And also, I think we clarified at previous meeting that, this is an actual mandate that this project in some form be done, correct? There are certain updates and additions that have to be completed.
We're obviously, we're limited on programming space and all that in our mental health services, since we have them, to have them in a pod, we were just looking to have them, actually have legitimate office space and programming space, along with some other upgrades to the facility, yes.
So the mandate is not to the health, the Winnebago County Mental Health Board, is to Winnebago County.
Yes,
So, yeah, so,
to provide the services for the county.
yeah, I mean, the mandate is to upgrade the juvenile detention center.
Yeah. not
So the
mental
mental
health.
health part is just a bonus to us. And so they're gonna have to find the money either way, though.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to, yeah, they're gonna have to.
So just to be clear, we're asking them to go back to this venture and to see what $1 million will get. You don't have to wait a month. If they let you know next week, give us the information. So that by the time it comes back around, we're.
I would hope to have something within a week. They've been very helpful, very prompt.
Okay,
I'm not sure where we're at this, but somewhere I'm gonna make a motion to leave this over until the next meeting.
So we have a motion to approve with a second. You can make a motion to table the motion to approve, I believe, and then we vote on the motion to table, and then we can untable the motion to approve at the next meeting.
Motion to table the motion that's on the floor.
Second.
all in favor of that? Any opposed? Okay, all right. It's under advisement, but we're gonna wait for more information and then we'll deal with it in a month.
I hope you understand where we're coming from on this.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right, so. The next one is, we're moving to, resolution to extend, our years 5 and 6 renewals. And, so in this case, Winnebago County Mental Health Board published a 3-year strategic plan defining the priorities and the target for program years 4 through 6, and released a notice of opportunity for program years 4 through 6, requesting proposals aligned with our strategic plan for up to $60 million of total funding. And whereas the Winnebago County Mental Health Board has approved 38 proposals for a total of $59,954,466.19 for program years 4 through 6. And whereas the Winnebago County Mental Health Board agreed to furnish 13 proposals with a 1 year of grant funding with the following addition to their funding agreements, herein known as simply the agreement. And whereas section 1 of the agreement says this contract shall commence June 1st, 2024, and end May 31st, 2025 as the initial term. Therefore, this agreement may be extended for 2 one-year periods. And whereas, in order to maintain congruence with section 1 of the funding agreement, the contract years for 13 proposals must be extended for 1 or 2 additional years as full or reduced amounts. And whereas the Mental Health Board reviewed, evaluated, and scored the 13 program years, 6 renewal applications according to established scoring rubrics, and developed recommendations for these organizations and programs. Therefore, be it resolved by the Winnebago County Mental Health Board as follows. Okay. For this, we have then, for what as follows is for the organization, for the Boys and Girls Club of Rockford, for their social emotional building, $880,458.76. For the City of Rockford Health and Human Services for their impact program, $1,304,401 for that program. For Lifescape for their senior mental health program, $357,878. For Marshmallow Hope Youth Suicide Prevention, $873,868. Prairie State Legal Services for Winnebago County residents with mental illness, $70,268. Shelter Care Ministries for their outreach and housing stability program at Jubilee Center, $179,552. For the University of Illinois College of Medicine, Clinical Learning and Education Addiction, $963,770. And for the University of Illinois College of Medicine, their merit program, enhanced services for community prevention, $493,961.44. Then for Winnebago County, first for the juvenile detention program, reducing isolation, $973,967.10. For Winnebago County Juvenile Resource Intervention Center for their behavioral health council continuation, $412,710.65. For the Resource Intervention Center for behavioral health continuation for Winnebago County, $412,710.62. For the Winnebago County Health Department, the Trauma Informed Community Care, $345,625.70. And finally, for the Youth Services Network, Mental Health for Homeless Youth, $923,078.08. Now, for that, we are going to need a vote for the approval. A motion, please. Okay, we have that. Okay, moved in second. Okay. Do Roll call, Mariana Body, Andrell Bradshaw,
Yes.
Dr. Copeland,
Yes.
Dr. Giardina,
Yes.
Dr. Gorski, Margie Lindmark, Tim Neighbors.
Yes.
Jeff Nielsen,
Yes.
Dr. Penny,
Yes.
Mohammed Yunus,
Yes.
and Richard Clutter, yes. Okay, all of that is passed. Okay. Okay. Now, we get into discussion items here.
Yeah, so 3 discussion items, and I'll go through these as concisely as possible, but feel free to ask questions. I have offered to the board that I would do a quarterly budget report update, so I'm providing that here, and this is looking at the fiscal year 2025 quarter 1 numbers, which covers October through December of 2024. So you'll see on this budget report a kind of historical view of past fiscal years, what was budgeted for 2025, and then where we are to date. And in the expense categories, you can see on a percentage basis, what percentage of the total budget category that is, as a way of kind of benchmarking where we're at. So 3 months is 25% of the way through the year. That kind of gives you your benchmark. So in a couple areas, if we look at revenue's coming in at about 27%, so just above what you would expect, right at the 25% mark. And then expenses, on program expenses, which is the largest part of the budget, and I put that in italics because that's the one that lags, so I'm going off my best estimate based on financial processing paperwork we've done. It's not what's actually hit the budget report at the county level, but I'm estimating that to be at about $5 million if I look at what we processed for payment approvals during that time, out of a budget of just under $30 million, so about 17%, 25% of the way through the year. So on all of the kind of operational categories, what we call admin costs or operational costs, we are under budget in each of those areas. Aside from liability insurance and membership dues, which are upfront costs, essentially because they're one-time payments and that's front-loaded in the budget. So I don't anticipate to go over budget in those categories, even though it's on a percentage basis ahead of schedule. Obviously, we'll have to keep an eye on legal expenses with the increased activity, but for the first quarter where utilization was low, utilization is picking up in this second quarter, so we'll bring back a quarterly report in the next quarter and keep an eye on some of these categories. I also had an MBA intern who worked with me over his spring semester. He has now moved on in his program, and he helped me identify key performance indicators for this type of operation. We had previously been tracking some things. He did some additional research for me, so I've added some key performance indicator categories at the bottom here, and some targets where we'd like to get for the year. So as you see, that percentage of budget utilization has gone up every year. Really, we'd like to get to 80 or 85%, but in terms of scaling up the operation, the goal for FY25 would be about 75%, and through quarter 1, we were at 68%, which is an increase from fiscal year 24. So, and then on percent of admin cost, it's really, again, the typical mental health board is going to be 10 to 15%. But because of the way we operate, we're looking at trying to stay in that range of 3.5 to 4.5%. So about 4 plus or minus 4% target. And we're coming in at just under 3.5 through the first quarter. Also, I just say in terms of reserves, The goal would be to continue to bring that down to about a 12-month, so 12-month of expenses in reserve. At the end of the last fiscal year, we're at 21 months. The goal would be to try to get to 18 months by the end of this fiscal year, and then to bring that down to 12 over the next 1 to 2 fiscal years. Just continue to eat at some of the surplus funding with some of these one-time funding projects. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Strategic plan. So we took a look at everything, did some internal discussions. We got your feedback as board members following up from the presentation we had given at the last board meeting, where we gave kind of the updates in each of the categories. And I would say based on the feedback that we have gotten, we do not see the need to update anything in the strategic plan at this time. We do an update process every 3 years anyways. There was nothing that was reaching the level of importance or urgency that dictated a change right now at the 1-year mark. So unless we hear otherwise today from you as the board members, we will keep the strategic plan without changes for this year, and then enter a brief annual review again next year, and then our full 3-year process the following year, which will include an updated community health needs assessment. Okay, hearing no feedback, there will not be a strategic plan 2.1 at this point. It'll stay strategic plan 2.0 without changes. And then I'm going to just quickly pop up here for a presentation on grassroots funding. Start with the fonts. So for some time, we've had discussions about what it would look like to do a small grants program, or what some funders call grassroots funding. And kind of the essence of that is to support smaller nonprofits to meet community needs that might otherwise have not been the best fit for more competitive funding cycles in which they're competing against larger organizations, and to also kind of meet the community needs based on the idea or the philosophy that some smaller community-based organizations are working with subsets of the population that might be underserved or not always reached through traditional services. And so we looked at some, I would say, other funders, some best practices. St. Louis County has a children's service fund, which is a quarter-cent sales tax. They bring in about $50 million a year, so a little bit bigger than us. And they've been doing what they call grassroots funding. Now they're going into their 3rd funding cycle. Their first 2 funding cycles were multi-year. They have 23 organizations now that they fund through this. They had, we had the opportunity when Chelsea and I went to Madison County to meet with the Madison County Mental Health Board to cross the river and meet with the staff at the Children's Service Fund, and was able to then reconnect with them over a Zoom meeting recently. And they shared a lot of information with us and a lot of wisdom with us about their lessons learned in this process. And so we have, based on some of our learning from them and looking at what some of the board discussion has been about the local community need, developed some ideas about how we would proceed with this if we, if the board would like us to continue in the development of this funding opportunity. So essentially what we would be looking at is small grants to support smaller community-based organizations and addressing still focused on mental health and substance use services and needs. That we're looking at the budget and based on kind of scaling what we do to our community size, based on what St. Louis is doing with their community size, we think that $2 million over 2 years would be a good target amount with, say, up to. So that'd be up to $1 million per year with no more than 10 awards. So that would be up to $100,000 per year per organization for up to 2 years. That roughly would allow for potentially 1 full-time staff, depending on the nature of the program, or some contracting out of mental health services. I think less than that makes it challenging to have staff funded through this. And so then it kind of would put to question what the proposals are actually doing or what we're asking for. I think also we probably need to have a cap on awards, such as 10 or a different number. This is not, one thing we have learned is that this is not the most efficient way to distribute funds. The amount of support that is given to the smaller grant requests, if you think about our core program grants, there's an average of $500,000 award size. And we kind of monitor that cost per grant administered at about $15,000 per grant administered for operational and admin support. We'd probably be looking at almost an equal amount of support that's being needed for a much smaller grant size. Okay, so it's the percentage of admin costs to administer these grants is going to be higher than core program grants or accelerated grants, which have larger award sizes. And in some cases, the organizations have more established financial departments and things of that nature that actually make it easier for them to do our reporting, whereas some of these organizations might need more support. So just looking at, so what types of things would be funded, we'd still keep it within the confines of the current mental health board funding policy. We'd be looking for programs that are not currently funded or under a core program grant. So it'd be for organizations that are not getting core program funding. So kind of need to pick or choose what you're applying for. Preference would be given to organizations with an operating budget of less than $1 million, but still maintaining a gold star on Candid, which is a nonprofit, I would say, quality control platform, and that's something that the St. Louis Children's Fund uses and strongly recommended to have in place, that type of quality control. And then to have, at minimum, have at least some type of executive director or equivalent staff position already hired. I don't think the intent is to start up new nonprofits that are using this as their sole source of funding and hiring a new director with this funding, but rather to support existing smaller organizations to that are already doing services in order to either build their capacity or add on additional services to what they're doing. So we would be looking at organizations that have established personnel or board governance policies already and that already have the appropriate levels of insurance in place to support this type of funding, like professional liability, workers' comp insurance, et cetera. And then we'd also be looking for organizations that physically reside in an area for the community that they're targeting or working with, or have some type of lived experience or firsthand experience within their organization for the community that they're serving. Just proposal requirements, what we would propose is that, again, $100,000 max per year, not to exceed $200,000 total, still aligned with the priority areas as defined in the strategic plan, connecting to the community support system framework and the services within that, being connected to the board's target populations, and just to maybe be very clear about what's not included in that, because that's sometimes the feedback that we've gotten from organizations as well, as like, this is not meant to be for kind of alternative therapy programs or holistic developmental services, really meant to stay within that community support system framework of clinically based, evidence-based mental health services. And then on the funding side, one of the things that we got as kind of intelligence and wisdom from the communities, from the St. Louis model is that sometimes it can be really hard to itemize all of the indirect and overhead expenses, and that when these programs are primarily one staff person maybe being supported with the funding, that one of the ways to do that would just to be to have the evidence of expenditure on the personnel, and then have kind of a markup amount that's available for overhead. So in this case, you have a budget where 75% of the budget is for direct personnel, and you want that evidence of expenditure, but then there's an automatic additional 30% of the budget that's then offered to that personnel equivalent that can cover overhead costs. It keeps everybody kind of on the same playing field in terms of making sure everybody has kind of the same amount to work with for occupancy expenses or indirect expenses, and reduces the administrative burden both on the organization and on us doing the reviews to have to go through all these itemized receipts for every indirect expense, especially when it's such a small budget to begin with. So that would be something that we would propose, certainly open to hear your feedback or questions on that. Or in the case where we've seen some of our organizations like YMCA and Boys and Girls Club as good examples in our core programs where they have said we want to hire out a clinical service because we don't have clinical supervisors within our organization, that if they were to contract out a clinical service, that they would be allowed a 15% indirect rate on that contract cost, which is the current Code of Federal Regulations standard, and I believe the state of Illinois has now updated to that standard as well. This is a little bit more about Candid and how they do that kind of screening of quality check on organizations, and gold is not the highest. I believe there's a platinum designation, so gold's kind of good quality, but not the highest level, so it's not meant to be terribly restrictive, but still maintain a level of quality, that there's good utilization and integrity of the public funding. And the final thing, and I don't think that Children's Services does this, but we've had some conversations at the board level. I know when we met with the health committee from 815 Eliminate Racism and League of Women Voters, Tim, Ed, Marianne, and I had met with them and talked a little bit about grassroots funding opportunities and got some of their feedback. And even what we've seen in the core programs with organizations like Rockford Barbell or other smaller organizations that have over time built the capacity to manage grants well, is we've seen the role of mentorship at an organizational level be very important. So when an organization like a Boys and Girls Club brings in Rockford Barbell and helps them build their capacity and internal control mechanisms to then be independent and independently manage a grant, we've seen that be successful. And so we would propose that there be a mentorship component, that maybe it's not an absolute requirement, but that preference be given to organizations that have a mentor sponsor, which is an established organization with grant management history, who can work alongside that organization and help them be successful at doing the mechanisms of grant management. Yes.
So with us having that mechanism to have a mentorship sponsor proposal, would that allow organizations like on the silver level be able to apply?
We could look into the difference between silver and gold, but I think you still might want the gold level. I don't know, Alex, do you have any intelligence to speak to in terms of the difference between silver and gold?
If you go back a slide, gold has on the right, you can see the difference. It's leadership demographics and financial reports, which we have.
So potentially, that could be a way to mitigate some of the concerns of a silver organization.
Yeah, because the way when I look at it, I was like, if you require everybody to have a gold seal, gold standards, it's not really truly a grassroots program. And so, you know, that is still eliminate a lot of people if we just keep that standard.
Thank you, yeah, that's good feedback. We could take a closer look at that and maybe have a tiered system where, based on your status, there's a requirement of mentorship rather than just a preference. And then finally, if we're going to do this, we gotta have a timeline. So we're looking at, if we wanted to, I think that we don't want to have the funding open at the same time the core programs are, but I think we want to keep the program years aligned. Otherwise, our reports get really confusing. It's already kind of confusing when you have a fiscal year that's different from the program year. To then have another funding opportunity that has a different timeline in year might get really confusing. So if we were to align this with our current program year cycles, which run from June through the end of May, we probably want to get it, the first cycle started at the beginning of program year 5, and then have it go for 2 years and then alternate the core program opportunities with the grassroots. So in order to do that, we'd probably start looking at like a July launch date for a funding opportunity. And then just go through that whole process of abstracts, evaluation of abstracts, invitations for a full application, allowing some times for those mentorships to be developed, to sponsor applications, having a deadline for the full applications, doing the board reviews of the evaluations, awarding those, executing the contracts, and then I think one of the things we learned through the core programs as well as sometimes the newer programs need a startup period of time because it takes time to put out a position, you have the award. So often organizations lose 3 months of their budget just trying to hire somebody. And we thought maybe an onboarding period of 3 months where you know that you're gonna have the money, you can post the position, you can start doing the interviewing, et cetera, would be a nice way to not lose too much time once the program year actually starts. So there's a little bit of flexibility built into this that if we got a month behind, we could still make up the time, but this would be kind of what we'd be looking at. So with a potential launch date in July, the notice of funding, we definitely need your feedback as if this, you know, to like, do you want us to develop this program, basically? Because we're gonna have to really start getting serious about putting together the materials for it.
Do you want a full board discussion of this?
I'd like your feedback, yeah.
Man, on the surface, I think it's a great idea. I'd like to have a little more time to review. Could you send that out to us so we can discuss it next month, or want to do it now?
I'd be happy to send it out, and we can add some discussion time for next month. That's not a problem. If you want to have some thoughtful internal deliberation.
What kind, have we had any requests that we're not responding to that you see that would fall into this category? In other words,
Yeah.
no, we are really worried about whether or not we're covering the whole county with as much, services as we could get. So, I mean,
So what I would say is that we have, for the core programs, we have one funding model that we've made work for large organizations and small organizations that get that funding. I think it can sometimes be difficult for the smaller organizations to do all the same reporting requirements as the large organizations. And so I would even suggest that there might be some organizations that are currently under core programs that might want to apply for this as well and say, well, this would actually be a better fit for our organization size. And if we got approved for this, we would be willing to switch over from core program to this because the reporting requirements would be more congruent with the size of our budget and our organizational capacity. So that would be one example in terms of like then what other organizations are out in the community. I mean, some of this feedback's been coming to me from board members, so what are you all hearing, I guess would be my question.
Would there be a possibility of us to put some restrictions on this, that programs of certain size would be allowed to apply for this funding, and then larger programs would not?
Yeah, the proposal as we have it drafted and what St. Louis does is without boxing yourself in completely, that preference would be given to organizations with an operating budget under $1 million. But then you'd have to at least have some type of director or equivalent position, so it's not a completely never existed organization that's.
So some of the smaller agencies that have been coming our way and not getting the monies, this would be specifically a way for them to access some of the funding.
Potentially, if they meet the other requirements, it's certainly be encouraged to apply.
So to answer your question, like, we still have the model for our so what our organizational plans, we don't want to commit our mission drift. And so some of the problems that we have with the community is the holistic or the other mentorship programs aren't getting the money, and it's still preventing them from getting the money. I understand we don't want to get away from mission drift, but in order to appease the community, we have to develop some type of program to get them at least a little bit of money for their small programs. So, you know, I think that's where we run into the problems. Like, it's those programs that still have mental health plans and mental health strategies or mental health one-time fair programs, but they don't have a way to get any of this money. And, you know, just as we still are a tax-based political program that's based on the votes. So if we want to keep this funding, you know, we didn't have a problem this time, but it was rough. I was watching that, the comments on Facebook about how certain people don't see what's going on, for a while it stood at 51% for, those types of questions. And, like I still say, it still is a government organization, political organization, and those funds do count. We still have the ability to give those programs money under the state statute. It's just our mission drift is for severe clinical needs. And so we may have to open that up, just to appease the people. And this program right here just don't do that. That's what I'm looking at.
So one of the things that would fit in this would be community navigators, like under the client identification and outreach that would work with specialty population or underserved population within the community and help connect to maybe some of the services that we are currently funding. So do you feel that would be more aligned or help meet the need, or do you think there's still a gap in terms of?
There's not a gap in, we've always got a lot of gaps, but the gaps in just the amount of money, the access to the money. So it's just like, not necessarily, we're doing our job with as far as what we want to do with the money. Is just some of the times, some of the people that still have the votes need to have access as long as they're doing something mental health with the money, don't have access to this program. And so a lot of times they have a lot of voices. And so that I don't want us to hinder by not providing, just that little bit to them.
I understand the position about not hindering certain groups from having access, but I'm also concerned about the perception of us being swayed.
What you mean?
The information that you're talking about, looking at people complaining about certain things. And if every time we are up for renewal of the election process, we get a lot of kickback from the public, and then we come in and we change the way we do things, then that is going to give the perception that we're being swayed and not sticking to our specific mission.
Right. I I think once you take that step, and you go over, we're in the mission drift. And then based again on what you see, and if you go and ask some of the wakeboards, that I used to relate to that started in the 70s, there's a very small amount of money these days that is going from them to deal with what we have identified as the major problem, serious mental illness and serious emotionally disturbed. So, so if we sort of go with, well, we have had a number of people ask for prevention programs. If we give into that, again, based on experience, my opinion is we will lose our major mission, because that's been the trend of like what happens, because part of it also becomes part of the provider world, because it's easier to provide people who are unhappy but not ill, and so that's where the tendency would tend to go.
But we already have within, so let's lay out the problem. We already have within our budget and financial mechanism on how much we're gonna provide with each funding opportunity. So we got so much to give to core programs, so much to give to accelerator programs. We can still put that small amount in the budget. And that will help us get rid of some of this money, because the other caveat is we don't need a mental health program because they're sitting on too much money because we're not giving it away fast enough. That's the other thing that voters look at and say, well, we get rid of the program because they just take the money and not doing anything with it. So we have to find some kind of way to, keep it going.
I think that brings into play some more education of the community to get them to understand exactly what the mission is, what our focus is, and how to access funding according to that mission. I think a lot of problems that we run into is that people don't understand the mission, and then they don't know how to complete the information based on the wording that is needed.
And those organizations that can get that word out will be able to get funding from the mental health board, but under the guise of the funding process now, they're not able to get that. So just like you said, educating the community, that's one of the ways they can get money, but the only one that's getting money to educate the community right now is NAMI. And it's other organizations that can educate the community. I mean, that's another means that we can do that, because NAMI gets it on a bigger scale because they're a bigger organization. But there's other smaller organizations that can do that work for us, but we have to give them an opportunity to get the money.
So if I may, two things, quick question, the whole Gold Star candidate piece, you have to pay in order to get assessed, or is that something you just submit paperwork and then they just give you a ranking?
There's no cost associated.
Okay. So back to the educational piece, I think the hiccup that we're trying to work with is accountability and capacity to withstand audits and all those types of things in terms of small organizations. And that's why the mentorship piece is so, in my opinion, it was a great idea. I hear what you're saying, that I think that the way forward, and back to what Dr. Bragg was saying, is a better campaign as it relates to education in terms of what the mental health tax is actually for and what our community support system actually is. I know we've done it before, and I know that we're familiar with it, but a lot of people just hear mental health and then they'll try to shoehorn anything in there. And I don't think it's beneficial, because we saw that with we saw, if I could be frank, I remember when I first moved here, the 1 cent sales tax was supposed to be going towards certain things. And then you look up, and by the time everything got sort of dealt with politically, it went toward everything but what was suggested in the campaign. And I think that there is a way that we can hang on to our mission, our strategic plan, what our emphasis is, and at the same time, build up the capacity. We always talk about ecosystem. Again, the mentorship piece is a good piece, but I think there might be an opportunity in some kind of way to help people help the smaller organizations that are actually willing to do some of the work that we're trying to get funded. There's a way to help them to build their capacity. You mentioned, like, for example, if somebody's silver, figure out some kind of way. I think we need to do some thinking in that realm, because I don't think we should bend to political pressure, whether it be from the grassroots or whether it be from politicians. And we're getting it from both sides now, and I understand that, but that's why we're here, to hold the line. And there's no sense in going through a strategic plan or putting together a mission or whatever. And then whoever complains the loudest gets us to move off the square, and then the people who need the help the most still aren't getting the help.
Because they don't have the loudest voice.
Exactly.
I think we have also need to understand that the type of education that we're talking about is something that's gonna have to be done repeatedly.
Yes.
We know that people have very short attention spans, and that mental health jargon has become a part of the everyday lexicon without people even understanding those words that they're using. Everyone's bipolar, everyone's a narcissist, everyone, and when you ask people, well, what does that mean? They have no idea what that means. That DSM is this thick. I mean, but because it is, like I said, because all this jargon and lingo has become a part of everyday vernacular, everyone thinks they know what it means and they want a part of it.
Social emotional learning is another great example. I mean, that's the buzzword. You ask people, okay, well, what do you mean by that? You can give 15 different answers, but everybody wants to get funding. Well, it's mental health board, you need to fund it. Well, okay, we're clear about what the gaps are. I mean, we didn't come up with the gaps. We did a community survey piece. We're not just directing this because of the constituency that is here. We got a liberal or conservative or Democratic or Republican contingency, and we were working it out. We went to the community to see, okay, well, what are the gaps? And we did that more than once. And so I think we need to stick with that. But at the same time, I understand what Tim is saying. I just think that there's more than one way to skin a catfish. That somehow or another, continual education, sort of keeping a continuous campaign as relates to what we're actually about and not just what we're about, but what the actual need is in the and what these funds are actually doing. That's why the website and, on social media and all that, that's why that's so important. Because if they think that, oh, we're hoarding the money, or, oh, this is just going to the big guys, as opposed to, okay, wait a minute, look at how many people are actually being served who have, actual problems that otherwise would not be served.
38 programs.
Education is a key.
Right. Yeah, we need to be clear about who and what we are, and to be helpful to people who have their ideas, and provide them with the opportunity to bounce it off where we are, see if it fits. Okay. All right, any further discussion on that? All right, so we're going to, you want to bring this back next month?
Well, I thought you have enough to work with now.
Okay.
We got some board members on here, but.
Well, based on the current feedback, I feel like we'd be in a position to maybe pause and let you all kind of contemplate a little bit more, and then give us some direction. Like I said, it's not the most efficient way to distribute funds, so I feel the board has to be very bought into this for us to move it forward, because it will require some administrative support, and we understand with public funds how that also gets perceived. So just want to really make sure that that we're getting the direction from all of you that you feel this is mission critical and that we should proceed with the development of the program.
So can you send it out, and we'll do it next month, or respond to it, or do it next month?
Yep, we'd be happy to add it back as a discussion item at the next meeting.
Two other pieces of information. One, we really do want to do an executive session today, which is separate from this board meeting. The second piece is to let you know that Marge Lindmark has sent in her resignation from the board, so that we will need to initiate using our process to let people know that we have a position on our board open and look to fill that. So, and she, basically was telling us that her life is very busy. She has a lot of different issues going, but was positive about her experience board and as well. So, we appreciate that. Okay. So with that saying that, I'll entertain, pardon?
No, I was gonna make a motion for us to go into
Okay,
executive session.
all right. I'll entertain a motion, first of all, to adjourn this meeting.
Going to executive
Okay,
session.
okay, all right, we can do that. Motion for executive session, is there a second? Okay, Jeff seconds it. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, okay. And we're going to move to the room where we used to eat upstairs.
So the public knows, we'll come back out to open session, but there won't be any discussion or any agenda items, so we'll come back out and adjourn, so you're welcome to stay, but adjourn.
Motion to go back, motion to go back in open session. Second.
Second? All right.
Sorry, it's Jeff then.
So Jeff, you're making a motion for adjournment?
No, yeah.
You're back in the session for.
So Jeff, who was the second?
I was second.
Ed, okay, to go back into all in favor. Okay, so but I need to, hang on, I need to know who's here though.
There's 6 of us right here.
Terry left and so did Mohammed, so, and Ralph. I can also say that, sorry.
Now motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay.
All in
Okay.
favor?
Aye.
Okay, so adjourned.
Okay.